It's morning, so I'm drinking coffee.
On today's episode, we're doing things a little bit differently as we continue to adapt.
Today, on Stirring Up the Ladies, we're taking 3 mass market, mass produced wines of the world, and we're gonna blend them.
And what we're trying to do is put a blend together is better than any of the wines individually.
So we've got Mouton Cadet from Bordeaux.
This is one of the best-selling French wines here in North America. And this has really quite an expressive nose, very typical of Bordeaux. Nice kind of currant fruit, really fresh, but also a nice kind of savory herbal edge, which to me is really what I look for in Bordeaux. It's not just about ripeness of fruit, but it's about savoriness and complexity too.
There's a decent tannin structure to it. It's not overbearing in terms of tannin. It's a little thin, so it could definitely be bulked up with some of these weightier wines. Then we've got the Ruffino Chianti. Again, historic wine of the region, cheap and cheerful.
This is 100% Sangiovese. And really like you expect from Sangiovese, kind of pure, fresh red cherry fruit.
Yeah, there's a bit more richness to the fruit there, but we're also getting a spicy component.
And then the palate, really nice, lively, fresh acidity. It's what makes these wines so food friendly, and some of those kind of firm, astringent tannins that you can expect from Italian reds. But really, it's kind of a lovely, easy drinking style of Sangiovese, which makes sense for this price point. Just under $15. It certainly hits the mark in terms of what you'd want from a bottle of Chianti.
Then we've got Apothic Red here, which is a California red that is very much made for a certain consumer.
But the story here is really about confected, jammy red fruits. Almost had like an artificial character to it with a little bit of kind of confected vanilla oak character. And this definitely belongs to that category of sweet reds. And when we're talking about sweet reds, we're not talking about an ice wine level of sweetness. You know, this is about 18 grams per liter residual sugar. So you definitely can perceive that sweetness. And what that helps to do is not only give a little bit more richness to the wine, but also helps to tame some of the firm tannins that we noticed in the first 2 wines.
We're jammy. You can tell it's riper than the other 2. It's gonna bring some weight and some body. I would say that the tannic profile is probably almost more in the Apothic Red, but because there's that residual sugar balancing it out, it seems less harsh. But by far, does it have the most weight, the most body and presence on the palate. So if we can use that to bring some weight to these other 2, but tone down that sweetness because it's somewhat off-putting, why do you blend? It basically comes down to wanting the sum to be greater than the parts. And it's not always straightforward. There's been times where personally I've gone to blending wines together and you could take 2 really good wines and put them together and all of a sudden it becomes all disjointed and a much lesser wine than either of the 2 parts. So it's a finesse game. The first thing I'm gonna go for is just try and see where we're at with 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Generally in the winery I'll have graduated cylinders, but I've got mixing cups. I think that's too much of the Apothic. I do like the weight it's bringing, but it's almost overpowering the other 2. I'm gonna pare down the Apothic and I'll put in equal parts of the Mouton and do I have enough wine to be doing that? Okay, this is interesting. So this is what I wanted aromatically. I'm getting the Chianti is dominating, but it's being lifted by the richer fruits of the Apothic. I think the Mouton is delicate and it's just getting kind of overpowered by the other 2. That Apothic is just weird. It just overpowers the palate. Need to ponder this. So if I want to bulk up the Chianti, oh hello. We're definitely coming through Chianti forward, which is probably a good thing. Oh man, I just think the Apothic is too prevalent there, even at 20%. I'm gonna try one more. Ooh, with the increase in the Mouton over the increase in the Chianti, I prefer the nose. It's red fruits, it's jammy, strawberries. It's got the savoriness just slightly from the Chianti coming in, and I'm not getting that overtly baked fruit from the Apothic. I think we're there.
And so this is the blend that I've come up with. It ends up being roughly 66% of the Bordeaux. No surprise there. That was my favorite wine in the lineup. I love that herbal edge. That means 32% was Chianti. What I like is it still comes through that red cherry fruit, that subtle spice, that freshness on the palate, and then 2% Apothic Red. I just found anything over 5% really of the blend. The Apothic Red became the dominant feature in the wine. It really jumped out of the glass. And what's interesting, you think 2%, okay, that's basically a drop in a pond, but it really comes through here. I like that it's added a little bit of dark fruit character. You get a little hint of spice and vanilla as well, kind of that oak character, but still on the palate, this is dry. You still have some firmness of tannin. That'd be my only kind of complaint of the blend as it is right now. So I'm thinking before I drop this off to Ryan, I may put this through the blender just to help aerate it and hopefully soften it and make it a little bit more approachable right out of the gates.
We're 47% of Mouton Cadet. We are 35% of Chianti, and whatever that math adds up to, we are 19% Apothic. And we'll see what Geoffrey thinks, and we'll see what Geoffrey came up with. Maybe he's bettered me. Let's find out.
Here we are. The viewer will know more than Geoffrey and I both at this present point in time. We're starting with mine. I was texting Geoffrey after I had filmed the vlog session, and I told him I think I've bungled this. I'm pretty sure I've made a wine worse than the 3 individual wines.
I think this is pretty good.
Do you like it? Okay.
Yeah, no, just from memory, without even going to the other 3 individual wines, I think this is better for sure.
I'll give it a try. I did 4 iterations of a blend, and I went back after they had been sitting out for a little bit, and I was like, oh man, I should have gone with number 2. I was getting a overpowering bitterness on the palate from this one that I had chosen.
I had a similar problem. Pretty much all of the blends that I came up with, I thought were quite grippy in terms of the tannin profile. I was going to throw it in a blender, actually. That was going to be like my trick. I was going to put it in the blender today and be like, oh. So my feeling is probably you used a little bit more Apothic Reds than I did, I think. I don't know. Well, you probably couldn't go lower. The rules that we established where you had to use all 3 in some form.
We should have put percentages down, like you had to use a minimum and you couldn't use them over a certain percentage, but there was no rules, just use all 3.
But man, pretty much any Apothic Red you put in the blend is like, oh yeah, that's Apothic Red.
Oh, I know. The first thing I did was just go equal thirds. And as soon as I did that, I was like, oh God, the Apothic just completely overpowers the other 2.
I think I knew almost right away that Apothic Red was going to be a small component of my blend. So I kind of did the same thing, but I just did the Chianti and the Bordeaux 50-50 to see what ratio do I like of these 2. And then figured out how much Apothic Red I could add.
Oh, interesting.
That made the blend at least not worse, but maybe slightly better.
I think a bit of Apothic Red maybe does help them.
Yeah, I agree.
Specifically for the Mouton Cadet, I find that one quite thin and quite delicate. So I thought like the richness and the opulence from the Apothic Red would help it, build some weight, mid-palate weight, and some mouthfeel. But then you get stuck with the residual sugar that is just off-putting.
My guess is maybe you used a higher proportion of Chianti than I did.
Maybe.
If I were to throw out numbers, I guess I would say something like 55% Chianti, 40% Bordeaux, and 5% Apothic Red.
But to me, you used more Chianti than I did. This is interesting because one of my iterations, I think, was quite close to this.
Yeah, okay. Ours are very different. I would say it's definitely more Apothic Reds in yours.
Oh, man. As soon as I go back to it, now I can just smell the Apothic Red in it.
But it gives it a little bit more fruit than mine.
But it also gives it that confected oak, like almost a confected savoriness, has an artificialness to it.
Yeah, so this was my problem. Like I didn't want the confected fruit, the confected oak to come through. I wanted some of that dark fruit profile. I wanted hopefully some richness and weight, but yeah, that's why I felt certainly 10% or more, it became quite prominent in the blend. So what would you say, what's your guess in terms of percentages for my blend then?
Given what you just said.
Yeah, I think I've given you actually a fair bit of information.
And having gone back to that, So there must be 5%. Maybe there's even less. Maybe that's why you had the teaspoons out. But we'll just say a nice round 5% of Apothic.
It's easier for the math to do it that way too.
What's interesting is you think there's more Chianti in mine than there is in yours, which means maybe you put it at almost 50-50 for the other two, but maybe that means you're leaning in the way of Mouton Cadet. So I'll say, what did you say? I'll say the opposite of that. I'll say 55 Mouton Cadet, 40 Chianti, and 5 Apothic. Does that math add up? Yeah.
Okay, that's actually pretty close. If I recall correctly, my blend is 65%. This is
okay.
rough, plus or minus a couple.
Yeah.
But 60. I mean, we're using tablespoons. But 65% Mouton Cadet,
okay.
32% Chianti, and then 2% Apothic Red.
2%. Wow. There should have been that minimum on there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, even I said 10% just now, but I felt even above 5%. So the Apothic Red became quite prominent.
So I got it down to 19% Apothic Red.
Oh, wow. Okay, that adds up.
47% Mouton Cadet, and the remainder, which is, like 38 or whatever.
Okay, but much more evenly
Chianti.
distributed than mine. I'd be curious to know kind of your thought process. But my thought process was I wanted something that'd probably be closer to what, say, we'd want to drink. Like, okay, I want something that's still savory, doesn't have that confected fruit character, and then it's dry, which basically, those last two elements are really
important,
detrimental to Apothic Red.
But the takeaway is it can be done. You could buy all three and then make yourself a big blend in a big old punch bowl.
Yeah, and I think you still come out ahead. Like, it's not like we've taken these, whatever they are, $15 wines, and we're like, oh, here's a $50 wine. We've created magic out of thin air. It's marginally better. You're a winemaker, so this is not quite a day in the life because blending, doesn't happen 365 days a year.
No, and it doesn't happen in a morning.
Exactly. So how would kind of like what we've done differ from what you do as part of your day job?
Well, the premise is not far off of what we'll do when it comes to red blending time. It's just the precision and the amount of care that goes into it, I think, is where it differs. We actually have graduated cylinders, which makes it nice and easy. But the more difficult part, is once you've selected your blend, then you got to go and make it happen in the winery, which is a bit more tricky on a larger scale when you were dealing with hundreds of barrels and they're all over the winery and you've got to get your flow meters out and pumps and tanks.
So that was kind of always one of my thoughts or questions is, so you do up your kind of trial blends on the lab bench.
Yeah.
And then when you actually, we're going to the winery, we're blending barrels together, we're blending tanks together. How close do those line up?
Yeah. Like you try and be as accurate as possible on the lab bench, but I don't know. That's hard to say how accurate you get. Yeah, I think you get close.
So you think 95%, 97%, 99%?
You're in the 90th percentile.
Well, that brings up two other points. The first is we're tasting 3 incredibly popular red wines, that are huge in their production volume. So it's easy for us to say, I'm just not going to use 3/4 of this bottle of Apothic Reds because no, it's not good enough for my blend and I'm an artist. But if you're, a winemaker at that production level, you can't go to your sales and marketing department and say, oh, unfortunately, this batch of Apothic Reds, 1,000 cases and not hundreds of thousands of cases. I'm so sorry. It's like, no, you have to do what works. And so I imagine, there's certainly blending here, but it's a bit of a trickle down too, right? Because you're putting your blends together for your top wines and whatever doesn't make that wine kind of goes to the next and so on until eventually we hit near the bottom rung and you're like, well, there's nowhere else to go but either this bottle or the drain or the the bulk wine trade, or you could repurpose it, you could distill it. Maybe you're just selling it to a distillery and they're using it. If there's a local distillery, there's avenues to get rid of wines that don't make the cut. But obviously at the end of the day, it makes much more sense as a business to be able to bottle all the wine you make at the highest dollar value you can sell it for. Yeah. And I guess I should be clear. It's not that these 3 wines are the bottom rung of that quality ladder, because it goes much, much lower.
I would think there's thousands upon thousands of liters of each of these wines that don't make it because they're not up to the quality level to even enter into these wines.
Yeah. The second point that I was going to make is when they're going to blend these wines, it's not just about the individual lots that they have in the winery, but also some of the winemaking tricks that they can potentially then begin to roll out here. Especially I'm thinking for the Apothic Red in terms of, there's some tools that they're probably playing with on the lab bench too, as they go to put a blend together.
Yeah, there'll be additives, and who knows if they are putting a blend together and then going through the process where they're doing bench trials about different additives they could use to, provide different aspects, or if they're doing that all on the fly.
That oak profile, that's certainly coming from some oak additives.
Yeah, but that could be during fermentation. I don't know where that's going to enter in the process there. Because Apothic, I feel like Apothic is such a recipe-driven wine that once they have a blend, then they're fine-tuning it with oak additives and stuff like that for a very specific target audience.
But what's the takeaway?
What's the takeaway? Don't feel you're stuck with what you got.
Well, I think it was just kind of a fun exercise, and it was supposed to be a little goofy, I suppose. But, wine's not supposed to be precious.
No.
So it's about kind of experimenting, learning, and hopefully just drinking something delicious.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that means you're stuck with a bottle of wine that you don't like, and you've got some other whatever lying around.
Just see what you can do. Make it something you can enjoy.
I mean, there's probably a lot of wines where 2 or 5% of Apothic Reds could help it out a little bit. Except for Apothic Reds. I don't think we need more Apothic Reds.
I think that's going to do it.
But that was pretty fun, actually.
Yeah, we should we should do this again. More challenges in the future. Maybe a white wine one.
Chardonnay would be an interesting one.
We'll see. Maybe people out there have ideas. And leave them in the comments. Some wines that we should try and blend to try and make palatable or something like that.
We'll put our blends, the percentages in the comments, so people can make them at home. This is pretty easy to do. It's not rocket science. Vote Brian. Vote Jeff.
Like and subscribe, as always.
Like and subscribe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers. Until next time.
Cheers. I need more glassware.